talking about how to get results without spending too much money. By way of quick introduction, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Engagely. We are in booth Q41. We started the company in June of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. But Daphne, who was for many years a professor of computer science at Stanford, and I started previously a company called Coursera. How many people know Coursera? Great, thank you. So Coursera today is more than 140 million learners. And what happened was that during the pandemic, we have two girls. I forgot to mention she's also my wife. She always tells me my biggest accomplishment is she hasn't divorced me yet. So I'm still working on it. But we have two girls who were at the time high school students, and they started studying at Zoom school. They absolutely hated it. So the older one found a way how to watch movies while allegedly being in class, and the younger one was playing video games. So we figured there's got to be a better solution for teaching online. And the thing is that online teaching is where the future is heading. Even before the pandemic in the United States, more than 50% of most education in community colleges was already online. Today, many universities, especially for-profit universities in the US, switched over to fully online. And it's not changing. I know there's kind of a move of going back to the office, but still, the majority of companies are going to remain hybrid. How many of you are working in a hybrid company where you don't have to go every day to the office? Great, thank you. How many who are not in a hybrid would like to be hybrid? Yeah. I think all the rest are just shy. I mean, most people like the hybrid work environment. So the thing is, there is a big engagement problem that's caused by that. Now, we did not make up these numbers. If you look at the source over here is Gallup. Gallup is probably one of the top polling companies in the world. And so this is a very, very bad number that only 13% of all employees are engaged. And we believe that one of the main reasons is there's no tools that were designed specifically for keeping online students engaged, whether they're employees or students in university or even in a school environment. So the interesting thing is that this is also verified by employees. If you look over here, more than half of the employees in companies believe that the companies do not have the right tool for online education. Now what happens is most people in your line of work go to IT, explain what they need, and IT says, oh, we can use Zoom, we can use Teams, no problem. The thing is, these tools were not designed for education. They were designed for business meetings where engagement is a given. I always tell people once I had to put a nail in a wall using a plier. It's much harder to do than with a hammer. You need the right tool for the right task. And this is not what video conferencing tools are designed for. And so one of the ways people compensate for that is by having a hodgepodge of different platforms. So you can see over here that about half of companies use 6 to 10 different platforms to teach, and almost a third use 11 to 20%. In your company, how many of you use only one tool for online education? Yeah, nobody's raising their hand. And again, it's a problem when you need to teach and you need to switch. Oh, we need to send a message, we'll use Slack. Oh, we need to use a whiteboard, we'll use Miro. Oh, polling and quizzing, you will use Mentometer. I mean, you're there to teach, and the person who's coming to learn is coming to learn, not to switch between different tabs inside a browser. And so this is another pretty startling statistic. Again, not one we made up. Same Gallup poll. 72% of employees in European companies are quiet quitters, which means they're getting a salary but not particularly happy. So my job here is not to scare you. It's actually to show hope. And so let me tell you the interesting things. The interesting things are that 80% of employees are very interested in advancing their career, especially in this new age of generative AI, where many jobs are disappearing. People understand that they need to continually upskill. This is, by the way, not just true in Europe or the US. It's true in China. It's true anywhere we are in India. It's true anywhere we have a growing young population that's looking to have job mobility, that's looking to stay in a job for no more than 4 or 5 years. This basically what you all are responsible for is what keep people employed. The other thing that's important is this whole peer-to-peer instruction, which the previous speaker also spoke about. It's much more natural for people to learn from each other than to learn from somebody standing in front of them and speaking. I mean, I wish we could do this whole thing inside an Engagely classroom. It would be much less boring. I mean, I'm kind of bored of hearing myself speak. I can't believe you're particularly interested either. It's much more fun when basically people can discuss, they can have a conversation, they can explore the materials. So this is what it's all about, which is active learning. Now, how many of you know the Bloom 2 Sigma? The Bloom 2 Sigma is, Bloom is one of the top learning experts in the world. Back in the 70s, he showed that having one-to-one teacher to learner automatically brings up the grade level by 2 grades. So it takes a C student into an A student. That's the power of one-to-one interaction. And so, obviously it's very, very expensive to train everybody on a one-to-one basis. So what's the solution? The solution is to do it in an active way. So even if you have a facilitator in front of the room, you still try to get as much interaction between the learners and themselves. And that's what active learning is all about. So these are some examples of active learning. How many of you practice active learning in your day-to-day job? Again, it's very hard to do nowadays, but when you think about the European heritage of apprenticeship, this is what apprenticeship is all about. It's basically learning by doing. Our 2 daughters went to a very expensive high school whose motto was very simple: learning by doing. When you do something, when you play, this is when people retain the knowledge. And I'll show in a second the statistics. So these are some examples of active learning. Peer-to-peer tutoring is extremely powerful for basically 2 reasons. One, the person who's getting the tutoring is getting one-to-one attention. Secondly, the peer who's teaching, his learning or her learning are reinforced. That means that by teaching somebody, you actually learn better than just learning it passively. Hands-on workshop are, again, extremely useful. I'm an engineer by training. If you put me in front of a room to learn how to program, I wouldn't know how to program. The only way you learn how to program is by programming. That's true about any other skill. And then role-playing is extremely effective. This, for example, is how people use our platform to learn psychology. There's a student who's learning psychology, another student who's learning psychology, and they basically practice on each other. And then collaborative learning, again, especially in the era of Gen AI, is very important. It's people learning together. So the way you do this is you come up with a pretty complex problem, and the people in the room are learning as a team. They're figuring it out on their own as a group. So active learning can be one-on-one, but we believe that it's better when it's collaborative and social. And that's especially important for companies that are doing hybrid, because that's the only way in which their employees can get to learn each other and know each other. So for example, at Engagely, we have people in more than 10 different countries. But for example, my colleague Maxime was in the back here. This was the first time I met him because I'm based in Silicon Valley in California, and he's in Quebec. But we brought him here because he told me he knows French. The French people are not sure that Quebec French is French, but for us Americans, it looks French enough. But anyway, I kind of felt like I've known him for a long time because of the Engagely platform, where you can have a conversation with somebody, even if they're basically a few thousand kilometers away. So again, these are basically not numbers we made up. And this is very important. You can see over here that active learning narrows the achievement gap by 45%. So again, same like I was saying, you take a C student, you make a C student, or in European, like somebody who gets 70% in a test, you make that person get up to 90%. All that by basically getting more involved in the materials, having a conversation with peers, and so on. And you can see if you do not do that, the failure rate is much higher. The failure rate can be up to 50% more, again, if you don't practice active learning. The other thing is retention. So one of the biggest problems with these type of one-to-many conversations is the retention is very low. Usually after a week, if I came and asked you, what did I talk about? You wouldn't remember anything. I guarantee it. I mean, I can tell you that when I was a college student, I would read material before a test. I did well on the test. The next week, I had no idea about what the material was about. So to really retain the material, you need to be able to practice it, to engage with it, to teach other people, and so on. And so this is where I get to why is this a good way to invest. It's because when you have people inside a training session, people always think about the cost of the tools or the cost of the content. This is not where the cost is. The cost is in the salaries of the people who are getting the training. If you think about the salary of an employee, 1 day of training minimum is €1,000. And so if you're not using every day very effectively, you're basically wasting money. And another thing is you're not training people just for the hell of it. You're training people because you want them to learn something and be able to use it later. This is where retention comes in. So again, by doing active learning, it gives people much better retention of the material. So in 2 months, if they have to use a material, they can use it because they remember it. And thirdly, we have a lot of people using Engagely for onboarding, especially in a hybrid environment where you're bringing people on board from all over the world. Using online onboarding is very efficient. And as I'll show in Engagely, the system is designed to do it in a collaborative way and in a social way so people can remember what their peers, not just the material. So now this is, as we call in America, a word from our sponsor. I have to say Engagely did pay for my plane ticket here. So I have to say a few words about Engagely. Core to our system is a concept of tables. The idea of a table, think about a very large ballroom. And in the ballroom, you have a podium like the one I'm on, and I'm holding a microphone and everybody can hear me. But you have these tables that are spaced far apart from each other. This is like, think about a big wedding or a big event. The people sitting at the tables can have a private conversation while at the same time listening to the people at the stage. This is not the breakout room. Everybody's in the one room. And it's very easy to move people back and forth from a mode where they're talking to everybody in the room to just hearing the people on the podium as well as hearing their peers. So far, so good? Thank you. The second thing that's core to our system is that everything is data-driven. So all the people who started this company are all engineers, 2 of which were Stanford professors of computer science. And we're very focused on presenting the trainers with data that gives you 2 things. One, you could see which learners are catching up, which ones need more help. And the other thing you could see is where in the material you could improve to drive more retention. The other thing is our system is designed from the beginning to be multimodal. What that means is it's the same exact system for synchronous and asynchronous. Same exact system, no difference. The user interface is the same, the data tracking is the same, and in our asynchronous sessions, people can join as a group. So you can have multiple different employees do a training together even though it's asynchronous. And again, the collaboration is at the heart of everything. So again, collaboration is extremely important. And the way we do that is by the tables. And so you could do many, many, many things at the tables. You could do a peer-to-peer instruction. You could do a pair programming. You could do a think, pair, share. There's many different types of activities you could do that are all built in to the tables. The other thing is inside our system, we have a seamless whiteboard as well as shared documents. So you can give materials for people to share. You can give them whiteboards to work on. And again, it's all built into one system. And then it's important to say that inside our system, all the polling and quizzing are built in. So you do not need to exit into a different system to do polling or quizzing, whether it's in the live session or in the recording session. And also all the materials are basically starting from PowerPoint or from a PDF file. You do not need to do anything else, so you can build directly into your PowerPoint slides, quizzes and polls. And again, people who watch the recording of the session have to respond to the polls and quizzes. So in terms of how many attendees you could have in one session, today you can actually have in one Engagely room 2,000 people live at the same time. This is 2,000 people with their cameras on and their microphone on. This is not a webinar where people can only send chat messages. You literally can have 2,000 people with all their cameras on and the microphone on. Per table, we recommend having no more than 10 people, although you can have more. The benefit of that is it allows people to have a conversation, also leave the microphone on. And this is the retention rates we're seeing with our customers and we're seeing with their employees who take the training. So at the key of the system is the data tracking. And the data tracking is not only shown post-fact, it's shown live to the instructor during the classroom. So the instructor can see on their screen in real time who's paying attention, who's sending chat messages, who's raising their hand, and so on. You can also basically use that in order to create engagement by doing polls, quizzes, reaching out to people, and so on. And lastly, the system is designed, if you'd like, especially if you're doing a big training, to have multiple different people providing the training. So we talked about data. How many of you feel like you're getting not enough data from your system? How many would like more data on the progress of the training? Thank you. So our system tracks everything. We track how long do people talk? How long did they say, how many chat messages did they send? Did they speak in front of the whole class or did they just speak in their small group? All that is tracked. We track, did they take notes? Did they answer correctly on the polls and quizzes? And again, all this data is analyzable, both horizontally across the whole class, as well as vertically per student across multiple sessions. And again, what we have seen, even in pretty fancy universities that use our system, that people take the data, they analyze the data, and they use that to improve the way they teach the next time. So as you would imagine, our system in universities is quite popular with business schools. Melbourne Business School is one of the top business schools in the world. This is a quote from one of the professors there. And again, I don't think today anybody can do a conference without using the two letters A and I. So first of all, I'd like to say that we heard about AI more than a year ago. Specifically, Daphne was a professor of AI at Stanford. Specifically, Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, was her student. And Sergey and Lair were students who founded Google, were students in her laboratory. And today she's running a big company that's using AI to find medicine. So we're very careful with the use of AI. We don't just sprinkle AI to sound cool. So what is it that we use AI in Engagely for? We use it for a few things. Firstly, we use it to automatically generate summaries of the classes. So after a class, all the participants get a summary of everything that was discussed. And the summary is two levels. There's a very high level, and then there is kind of, if you will, subchapters. When people click on the subchapters, they can automatically go into the particular section of the recording where that particular topic was discussed. That's one thing. The second thing, our system comes up with multiple choice questions and answers automatically based on the materials. One of the longest time it takes to prepare a class is to come up with interesting questions on the materials. Our system looks at all the material the instructor prepared and uses AI to recommend questions and answers. Another thing we have is the automated teaching assistant. So the teaching assistant is not just using ChatGPT in order to bring the data from the internet. It's literally using the materials presented in the class and a transcription of what the instructor talked about to provide the answers. And so the answers are relevant to that particular company, not just what it says on the general internet. One more thing we use AI for is to help analyze the data. We generate over a gigabyte of data per 1 hour class. So it's a huge amount of data. And so for a human being to try to analyze it manually is not going to be very successful. So we use AI to kind of sift through the data. One of the things we do, we have a large customer who is teaching in hundreds of schools, over 200,000 students that are basically grade schools. And what our system does is it automatically helps to figure out a match between the right teacher and the right student, just based on learning habits and teaching habits. And then lastly, we're very, very focused on privacy and security. So our system is single tenant, which means that your data stays, it's not pooled together with other people. Every one of our customers has a completely independent stack of machines. Secondly, we have full transparency on what we do with the data, which is basically nothing. The data we collect on your learners stays with you. And then thirdly, we do not use any data from customers to train models. So this is basically my last slide. We managed to do it in 9 minutes less than David gave me to talk. So we have time for questions. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much. We have a question. Let me get you a microphone. Hold on one second.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. I thought it's quite an interesting concept. You talked about the University of Melbourne, I think, the business school they had there, and how they use the feedback that you guys give them about the engagements to sort of change their course or their programs. Do you have any examples of like what people can change? How do they use the feedback that you guys give them to sort of change the courses that they give?
Thank you very much for the question. So not just in University of Melbourne, but in every customer, the first thing people notice is a complete imbalance between how much the instructor is speaking and how much the students are speaking. Everybody immediately sees it. If you ask a trainer ahead of time, how much do you think you're speaking? How much do you think the students are speaking? They're always wrong. It turns out that most people, you give them a microphone, they don't stop talking. We've seen this even in universities like University of Padova in Italy, which is a very, very old, very good university in Italy. The first time they ran, we showed the statistics. The professor was talking about 95% of the time. As soon as people see that, they completely change how they teach. They go from basically doing what I'm doing, which is talking, to doing a lot of group activities. So the professor introduces a topic, breaks the class into subgroups, and has the students talk about. Another thing they do is they start putting in a lot of polls and quizzes. So they stop every 2-3 minutes, like if you've taken a Coursera class. You stop every 2-3 minutes and you ask a question. Another thing that people do is they ask questions and they ask people to come to the podium to speak in front of the class. So the mix ends up between going down from 95% of the time of the instructor speaking to going down to less than half. And automatically student satisfaction goes up, retention goes up, and the professors like it too because they have to do less work. So it kind of works for everybody. Thank you for the question. It's a great question. Yes, please.
Bring the mic over. All right. Got it.
Thanks much for presentation. It was very interesting. I had a question about engagement and how you measure engagement. Of course, you're focusing on quantitative engagement, so how much time people talk and how many comments they do in the chat. Now, as a facilitator, it happened many times. You have the kind of chit-chat people that do a lot of comments that may or may not be relevant in a class. I am that kind of person, by the way. And there are other people that are very thoughtful and may do only one question at the end, but that question is what helps all the group to understand something very important. That's kind of more qualitative kind of engagement. Wouldn't you consider that having a lot of focus on the quantitative part may have a bias effect on those kind of personalities that are more thoughtful and tend to participate less, but with more deep analysis, let's say, on topics?
Thank you also for this great question. So I was a type of student who was always sitting in the back of the class, never saying anything. And so my engagement score would have been 0. So I 100% understand what you're saying. So a few things. First of all, the instructor, the facilitator, can grade any student who's speaking. So the student you said who comes at the end of the class with a very insightful question, when they come up to the podium, the instructor can literally click on their video and give them an A. And so automatically you know that this is a very good student. Secondly, you're right that just activity by itself doesn't make any sense, but we can combine the data with achievement scores. How did they do on the tests? What does LMS say about them? And you can kind of figure out if people are really engaged or just sending a bunch of unreasonable chat messages. And then lastly, the polls and quizzes, people have to answer correctly. So basically, we're taking in the qualitative as well as the quantitative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.